Yang Kyoungjong, the man who fought for 3 armies. War machiner. You've likely seen the photograph. A young Asian man, gaunt and hollow-eyed, sits on a beach in Normandy, wearing the uniform of a German soldier, surrounded by American paratroopers. The internet calls him Yang Kyoungjong, the Korean man who fought for 3 armies. He is often presented as history's ultimate footnote, a curiosity. But focusing only on the novelty of his uniform changes misses the real point. The real story isn't that he wore 3 different flags on his sleeve. It's what his journey reveals about the meat grinder logic of the Eastern Front, the desperate manpower math of the Axis and Allies, and the millions of other nameless men who were simply inventory to be transferred from one lost battle to the next. Before we look at the man, we have to look at the system that created him. A system where a peasant from one country could be fed into the Japanese war machine, salvaged by the Soviets, and then discarded by the Germans, all without a single voice in any of it. Yang's story begins not with a choice, but with a conquest. By 1938, Korea had been under Japanese rule for nearly 3 decades. For a young man like Yang Kyoungjong, living in Manchuria, conscription into the Imperial Japanese Army wasn't a matter of patriotism. It was the law of the occupied land. He was plugged into the Kyoungjong Army, the elite Japanese force positioned to counter the Soviet Union. This is our first lesson in survival during that era. When your nation is a colony, your body is a resource for the colonizer. He wasn't a soldier in the way we think of a volunteer. He was impressed labor with a rifle. The second act of his story is the one most people skip, because it requires understanding the Soviet doctrine of manpower. In 1939, Yang was captured by the Red Army during the border battles at Khalkhin Gol. Under the Geneva Convention, he should have been a prisoner of war, subject to repatriation. But on the Eastern Front, the rules were different. After the German invasion in 1941, the Soviet Union suffered catastrophic losses. By 1942, the Red Army was scraping the bottom of the manpower barrel. Stalin's logic was brutal but simple. A bullet doesn't care about the nationality of the man it hits. Yang was transferred from a Japanese prisoner to a Soviet Gulag inmate, and then, directly from the Gulag, issued a Red Army uniform. He was one of thousands of former POWs and political prisoners thrown into the meat grinder to stop the German advance. He survived the fighting, only to be captured again by the Wehrmacht in 1943, somewhere in eastern Ukraine. Now we arrive at the part of the story that is honestly least understood, the German Osttruppen phenomenon. By 1943, the Wehrmacht was bleeding out, they were suffering unsustainable losses, and the supply of pure German blood was running dry. The High Command made a pragmatic, if ideologically contradictory decision. They began recruiting extensively from the Soviet POW populations, men who, like Yang, were seen as subhuman by Nazi doctrine, but were now desperately needed to guard the Atlantic Wall. Yang was funneled into an Ost battalion. That's an Eastern battalion. These units were composed of Soviet POWs, Georgians, Cossacks, and Asians who were given a simple choice: starve in a stalag or put on a field gray uniform and hold a rifle in France. Yang was shipped to the Cotantan Peninsula, near Utah Beach, to man the Atlantic Wall against an invasion that, at that point, hadn't come yet. This brings us to D-Day, and the final ironic turn. When the Allies landed on June 6, 1944, the Osttruppen were often the first line of defense. They were considered less reliable than German troops, but honestly, they were expendable. Yang was captured by American paratroopers of the 506th Parachute Infantry Regiment, the Band of Brothers unit. To the Americans, he was an incomprehensible puzzle, a man with Asian features wearing a German uniform in France. They initially labeled him a young Japanese, assuming he was a bizarre straggler from the Pacific War. They just couldn't process the reality that he represented a Korean, swept up by Japan, captured by Russia, forced to fight for Germany, and now a prisoner of America. The reason this story matters for the serious student of warfare isn't the novelty of the 3 uniforms, it's really the lesson in logistics and human disposability. Yang Kyoungjong was not a unique case. Lieutenant Robert Brewer, the man who captured him, reported taking 4 Koreans prisoner that day. Historians estimate that by 1944, as much as 1/6 of the German infantry in Normandy were former Soviet citizens or POWs. These men weren't Nazis, they were survivors, who'd traded one set of captors for another. They reveal the truth about total war. It is a system that consumes men until they are either dead or until the system itself collapses. After the war, Yang did something remarkable. He didn't return to a homeland that was about to be torn apart by the World War II. Instead, he emigrated to the United States and lived in Illinois until 1992, silent about his past. He understood that his value was never in the flags he fought under, but in the simple act of outlasting them all. For the survivalist-minded viewer, Yang Kyoungjong's life offers a final, uncomfortable truth. Preparedness isn't just about stockpiling ammunition or mastering tactics. It's really about understanding that in a world of great powers, you are just a statistic to them. Yang survived not because he was the best fighter, but because he was adaptable. He learned to be useful to whoever held the gun at that moment. He didn't fight for a cause, he fought to see the next sunrise. That is the grim reality of conscription in a total war. The photo of him on that beach isn't a picture of a traitor or a hero. It's a picture of a man who ran out of masters. If you value deep dives into the forgotten corners of military history, the tactics that shaped the world, and the hard lessons of survival, make sure you subscribe to War Machiner. And hey, share this video with someone who needs to understand that history is rarely as simple as the flags on a map.